The train's whistle died like a final breath in the desert heat. Clara Whitman stood frozen on the platform, her rejection letter burning in trembling hands as a stranger's cold voice declared her unwanted before the entire town of Drywell Crossing. The crowd's whispers cut deeper than any knife, mail-order bride, desperate woman, shameful. She had nowhere to go, no money to return, no future but humiliation. Then a small boy's voice shattered the silence. "Papa, you're wrong. I sent for her." Every eye turned, every breath held, and in that moment, 3 broken souls collided in the unforgiving dust of 1882 Wyoming. If you want to see how a rejected woman and a grieving widower find redemption in the most unexpected way, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The July sun beat down on Drywell Crossing like a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, relentless and unforgiving. Clara Whitman felt every degree of that heat pressing through her dark traveling dress as she stepped off the passenger car, her worn leather valise heavy in one hand, a carefully folded letter clutched in the other. The platform smelled of creosote and dust, and the boards beneath her feet groaned with the weight of arrival. Hers and a dozen other travelers who scattered quickly into the arms of waiting family. She stood alone. Her eyes scanned the small crowd that had gathered, searching for a face that matched the description in the letters. Tall, dark-haired, strong features weathered by ranch work and Wyoming wind. She'd memorized every detail during the 3-day journey from Philadelphia, reading and rereading the words until the paper had grown soft as cloth. "Miss Whitman?" The voice came from behind her, rough-edged and cold as January iron. Clara turned and her breath caught. The man before her was exactly as described, and nothing like she'd imagined. Ethan Cole stood a head taller than most men, his shoulders broad beneath a dust-covered work shirt, his face carved into hard angles by sun and something darker. Grief, perhaps. Or anger. His dark eyes held no warmth, no welcome, only a terrible, weary resignation. "Mr. Cole," Clara's voice wavered despite her determination to sound confident. She extended her hand. "I'm so pleased to finally— This is a mistake." He didn't take her hand, didn't even glance at it. His gaze fixed somewhere over her shoulder, as if looking directly at her would make the moment more real than he could bear. "I don't know who sent you those letters, but it wasn't me. I never—" He stopped, jaw working. "I never asked for a wife." The words hit her like a physical blow. Around them, conversations died. Heads turned. The station master paused mid-stride, his hand frozen on a luggage cart. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't understand. The letters were signed with your name. They spoke of your son, your ranch, your— I didn't write them." Each word was a nail in a coffin. "I don't want a wife. I don't need a wife." His voice dropped lower, but in the sudden silence of the platform, everyone heard. "You need to go back where you came from." Humiliation flooded through her in hot, nauseating waves. She was aware, suddenly and acutely, of every eye on her. The 2 elderly women near the ticket office, hands pressed to their mouths in scandalized delight. The group of ranch hands by the water tower, elbowing each other and grinning. The station master shaking his head slowly, as if he'd seen this kind of disaster before. "I used every dollar I had to come here." Clara hated the tremor in her voice, hated the way her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "The letters promised. They said you needed— Well, I don't." Ethan's voice was flat, final. "There's a train back east tomorrow morning. I'll pay for your ticket. Consider it an apology for whatever fool sent those letters in my name." He turned to leave. Something in Clara snapped. She'd traveled 2,000 miles on the promise of a new life. She'd left behind a boarding house room the size of a closet, a teaching position that paid barely enough for bread, and the crushing loneliness of a city that had never felt like home. She'd risked everything on those letters. Letters filled with quiet desperation and honest need. Letters that had spoken to her own hidden hunger for purpose, for family, for belonging. "You're a coward." The words escaped before she could stop them. Ethan froze mid-step. Slowly he turned back, and for the first time he truly looked at her, really looked. His eyes were the color of winter storms, and just as cold. What did you say? Clara lifted her chin, even as her hand shook. I said you're a coward. Whatever happened to you, whoever hurt you, you're using it as an excuse to hurt someone else. Someone you don't even know. Someone who traveled across the country because your letters, someone's letters, promised hope. The silence stretched taut as a rope about to snap. You don't know anything about me. Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. I know you're a widower. I know you have a young son. I know your ranch is struggling and you work yourself half to death trying to keep it running. Clara's voice grew stronger with each word. I know because the letters told me, and I know whoever wrote them cared enough about you to ask for help. Which is more than you're doing right now. A muscle ticked in Ethan's jaw. Those letters had no right. Papa, stop! The child's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Every head swiveled toward the source. A small boy broke from the crowd, his boots kicking up dust as he ran. He couldn't have been more than 7, thin and wiry, with his father's dark hair and eyes that held too much awareness for someone so young. He wore patched trousers and a shirt that had been washed so many times the blue had faded to gray. He positioned himself directly between Clara and his father, small chest heaving, hands balled into fists at his sides. Noah, get back to the wagon. Ethan's voice carried a warning. No. The boy's chin jutted forward in defiance. You can't send her away. I won't let you. Son, this doesn't concern you. Yes, it does. Noah's voice cracked. I sent the letters. I wrote them. I used your name because I knew you wouldn't do it yourself, but I wrote every word. The platform erupted in gasps and whispers. Clara felt the world tilt slightly beneath her feet. The letters, those beautiful, heartbreaking letters about loneliness and hope, and needing someone to help carry the weight, had been written by a child. Ethan's face went white, then red. Noah, what did you do? I did what you were too scared to do. Tears streaked down the boy's dusty cheeks. I found someone to help us. Someone to make the house not so quiet. Someone to teach me reading and make the kitchen smell like food again, and maybe make you stop looking so sad all the time. Noah, Mama's gone. The boy's voice broke on a sob. She's been gone a whole year, and you won't talk about her, and you work until you fall asleep at the table, and we never laugh anymore, and I thought if someone came, if someone nice came. He couldn't finish. His small body shook with the force of his crying. Clara moved without thinking. She dropped to her knees in the dust, heedless of her dress, and placed gentle hands on the boy's shoulders. Noah, look at me. Look! He raised tear-swollen eyes. You are so brave, Clara said softly, aware of every ear straining to hear, but speaking only to him. What you did took courage. You saw your father hurting and you tried to help. That's not wrong. That's love. I just wanted someone, Noah whispered. I just wanted us to be a family again. Clara's throat tightened. She looked up at Ethan, who stood frozen, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, grief, shock, and something else, something that looked almost like pain. Mr. Cole, Clara said carefully, rising to her feet but keeping one hand on Noah's shoulder. I understand this isn't what you planned. It's not what I planned either. But your son went to great effort to bring me here. The least we can do is not shame him for it in front of the entire town. Ethan's jaw worked. What are you suggesting? A conversation, in private, away from... Clara glanced at the watching crowd. Curious ears. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, finally, he gave a curt nod. Fine. The wagon's this way. He turned and walked toward the edge of the platform without waiting to see if they'd follow. Noah grabbed Clara's hand, his palms small and rough and desperately tight, and pulled her forward. Come on, Miss Whitman. Our ranch isn't far, just 3 miles past the canyon road. Clara grabbed her valise with her free hand and let the boy lead her. Behind them, the whispers rose like a storm. Did you hear that? The boy sent for her. Poor thing, probably desperate for a mother. No respectable woman travels that far for a man she's never met. Ethan Cole's going to send her right back. Mark my words. Clara kept her spine straight and her eyes forward. She'd survived worse than small-town gossip. She'd survived poverty, loss, and the kind of loneliness that ate at you from the inside. She could survive this. The wagon was exactly what she'd expected, functional, worn, built for work rather than comfort. Ethan climbed onto the driver's seat without offering assistance. Noah scrambled up beside him, then turned and extended his hand to Clara. "Here, Miss Whitman, the step's tricky." She took his hand, grateful for the small kindness, and pulled herself up. There was barely room for three on the bench, and she found herself pressed against Noah's side as Ethan snapped the reins and the horses lurched forward. They rode in silence through the town. Drywell Crossing was larger than Clara had expected. A proper main street with a general store, a saloon, a church with a white steeple, and several side streets lined with modest homes. People stopped to stare as they passed. Women shielded their eyes and leaned close to whisper. Men paused their work, thumbs hooked in their belts, assessing. Clara kept her gaze straight ahead. Once they left the town behind, the landscape opened into vast stretches of scrubland dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted tree. The mountains rose in the distance, purple-gray against the blazing sky. The silence pressed down, broken only by the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip of hooves. "Miss Whitman?" Noah's voice was small. "Yes?" "Are you mad at me? For the letters?" Clara looked down at him, at his worried eyes and trembling lower lip. "No, sweetheart. I'm not mad. Papa's mad." "Your papa's surprised. There's a difference." "He's always mad." Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ever since Mama died." Clara glanced at Ethan. His profile was rigid, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road. A muscle ticked in his temple. "Grief makes people feel a lot of things," Clara said gently. "Sometimes it comes out as anger, but underneath, I think your papa is just very, very sad." "Are you sad too?" Noah asked. "Is that why you came?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Clara felt her careful composure crack slightly. "Yes," she admitted. "I suppose I am. I was alone in Philadelphia. I had work but no family, no one who needed me. And then your letters came and they were so honest, so—" She stopped, aware of Ethan's presence. "They made me hope I could be useful somewhere, to someone." "You can be useful to us," Noah said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You can teach me letters and numbers. Papa says I need schooling, but the town school's too far and he works too much to teach me proper. And the house is awful messy because Papa doesn't care about mess, and our old housekeeper, Mrs. Thornton, left after Mama died because she said the sadness was too thick to breathe through. And— Noah!" Ethan's voice cut through the boy's rambling. "Enough!" The boy fell silent, shrinking slightly into himself. Clara's heart ached. She'd seen this before, children trying desperately to hold together adults who were falling apart. It never worked. The weight was too much for small shoulders. The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. It was modest but well-maintained. A main house, a barn, a stable, and several outbuildings arranged around a central yard. Fences stretched into the distance, marking pastures where cattle grazed. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt heavy with absence, like a place holding its breath. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down without a word. He strode toward the barn, his shoulders tight with barely controlled tension. "Papa," Noah called after him. "Where are you going?" "Work." The single word drifted back. Then Ethan disappeared into the barn's shadow. Noah's face crumpled. Clara placed a hand on his back. "It's all right. He needs time to think." "He's going to send you away." The boy's voice was thick with tears. "I know he is." "Maybe. Maybe not." Clara climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from travel. "But either way, I'm here now. So why don't you show me this house that needs a woman's touch?" Noah's eyes widened hopefully. "Really? You'll stay? Even though Papa's being mean?" "I'll stay long enough for a proper conversation at least." Clara retrieved her valise. "Now come on. I could use a glass of water and a place to sit down." The boy practically leaped from the wagon, his earlier despair transforming into excited energy. "This way, Miss Whitman. Mind the step. It's loose. Papa keeps meaning to fix it, but he forgets. And watch out for the screen door. It sticks something awful." The house was exactly as Clara had imagined from the letters, sturdy, functional, and desperately in need of care. The front room held simple furniture covered in dust. The kitchen showed signs of meals prepared by someone who cooked only for survival, not pleasure. Dishes sat stacked in the basin. The floor needed sweeping. The windows were so covered in grime that the afternoon light barely penetrated. But underneath the neglect, Clara could see the bones of a home. Good, solid walls. A fireplace built for winter warmth. Shelves that had once held books and treasures. A kitchen table scarred by use and time. The kind of table where a family might gather. "It's not much," Noah said anxiously, watching her face. "Mama used to keep it nicer. She had curtains, and she'd put flowers in jars, and she'd make the whole place smell like bread and cinnamon. But after she died, Papa said there was no point in such things, said they didn't bring in money or feed cattle." Clara set down her valise and looked at the boy. "What did your mama die of, Noah? If you don't mind telling me." "Fever." His voice went flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. "It came on fast. One day she was fine, laughing and making pie. 3 days later she was gone. Doc Turner said there was nothing to be done. Some fevers just take people," he said. "Papa doesn't talk about it. He took down all her pictures the day after the funeral. Said looking at them hurt too much." Clara's chest tightened. She'd known loss herself. Her own parents had died within months of each other when she was 19, leaving her utterly alone in a city that showed no mercy to solitary women. She understood the instinct to hide away reminders, to bury grief so deep you hoped it might suffocate. But grief never suffocated. It only grew stronger in the dark. "I'm so sorry, Noah." The words felt inadequate, but she meant them. He shrugged, trying to be brave. "It's been a year. Papa says I should be over it by now." "Grief doesn't work on a schedule," Clara said gently. "Your papa should know that better than anyone." A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Ethan stood there, hat in his hands, dust coating his clothes. His expression was unreadable. "Noah, go tend the chickens. They need feeding before dark." "But Papa—" "Now, son." Noah glanced between them, clearly torn, then scurried toward the back door. "Yes, sir." When the door banged shut behind him, silence filled the kitchen. Clara waited, hands folded in front of her, refusing to be the first to speak. This was Ethan's moment, his move. He took a long breath, released it slowly. "I owe you an apology." Of all the things Clara had expected, that wasn't one of them. "Go on." "What I said at the station, how I said it, wasn't right. You didn't deserve to be humiliated like that." He met her eyes, and she saw genuine regret there. "Regardless of how you came to be here, you're a guest, a lady, and I treated you poorly." "You were shocked," Clara allowed. "I understand that. Shocked doesn't excuse cruel." Ethan turned his hat in his hands, studying it as if it held answers. "My son went behind my back, wrote letters in my name, brought a stranger across the country on false pretenses. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at—" He stopped, started again. "But none of that is your fault." "What are you going to do?" Clara asked quietly. "I don't know." The admission seemed to cost him. The right thing would be to send you back, pay your way home, compensate you for your trouble and the deception. "But—" His eyes met hers again. "But Noah's right about some things. The house is a disaster. I can't teach him what he needs to learn, and the town—" He grimaced. "After that scene at the station, the gossip will be vicious. If I send you away immediately, they'll tear your reputation to pieces." "And if I stay?" Clara's heart beat faster. "If you stay, they'll tear it to pieces in a different way." Ethan's voice was blunt. "Unmarried woman living under a widower's roof? They'll assume the worst. They'll make your life hell." "So we're trapped," Clara crossed her arms. "Either way, I'm ruined." "Not trapped. I'm giving you the choice." Ethan set his hat on the table. "You can leave tomorrow with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere no one knows what happened. Or you can stay. Temporarily." He held up a hand before she could interrupt. 1 month, you teach Noah, help organize the house, and in return I'll pay you a wage, same as I'd pay any housekeeper. At the end of the month, if it's not working, I'll still pay your fare back east and provide a reference letter. No shame, no judgment. Clara studied him. "And what about the gossip?" "Let them talk." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I've survived worse than wagging tongues." It was a practical offer, reasonable even, but something about it chafed. Why? Clara asked. Why offer this at all? Wouldn't it be easier to just send me away? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because my son looked me in the eye and called me a coward. And he wasn't wrong. The honesty startled her. I've been hiding, Ethan continued, from grief, from responsibility, from Noah's needs. I told myself I was protecting him by staying strong, by not showing weakness. But all I've really done is leave him alone in his sadness. He met her eyes. You traveled 2,000 miles on the strength of letters my 7-year-old son wrote. That takes either desperation or courage, and I'm guessing it's both. The least I can do is offer you a fair shake. Clara felt something shift in her chest. This man wasn't easy. He was hard-edged and grief-worn, carrying wounds that hadn't begun to heal. But underneath the hardness, she glimpsed something else. Integrity, honesty, a willingness to admit fault. She'd met plenty of men who couldn't do that. 1 month, she said, a proper wage, paid weekly, and I want Sunday afternoons to myself, time to walk, to read, to be alone if I choose. Done. And one more thing, Clara lifted her chin. I won't tolerate cruelty to Noah. If I see you being unfair to that boy because you're angry at the situation, I'll call you on it every single time. Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. You've got spine, I'll give you that. I've had to. Clara extended her hand. Do we have an agreement, Mr. Cole? He looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His palm was calloused, warm, and his grip was firm without being crushing. We have an agreement, Miss Whitman. They shook once, formally, and Clara felt the weight of the decision settle over her. 1 month, 30 days to teach a lonely boy, organize a grieving house, and prove she was more than a desperate woman chasing false promises. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. And chances, Clara had learned, were worth fighting for. The sun hadn't yet cleared the eastern ridge when Clara woke to the sound of boots on floorboards and the metallic clang of a coffee pot. She lay still for a moment in the narrow bed of the room that had once belonged to Noah's mother, disoriented by unfamiliar shadows and the profound silence of a place far from city noise. No street vendors calling their wares, no carriages rattling past, just wind and the distant lowing of cattle and the creak of old wood settling. She'd slept poorly, her mind churning through everything that had happened. The rejection at the platform, Noah's tearful confession, Ethan's grudging offer. She'd agreed to stay 1 month, but lying here in the pre-dawn darkness, the weight of that decision pressed down like stones on her chest. What had she done? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Whitman? Noah's voice was barely above a whisper. You awake? Clara sat up, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. I am now. Come in. The door cracked open and Noah's tousled head appeared. He was still in his nightshirt, bare feet poking out beneath the hem. Papa's making breakfast. He said to tell you it'll be ready in 10 minutes, and not to expect anything fancy. Tell your papa I'll be down shortly. Clara couldn't help but smile at the boy's formal delivery, as if he'd memorized the message word for word. Noah didn't leave. He hovered in the doorway, worrying his lower lip. Miss Whitman, are you really staying? You didn't change your mind in the night? The vulnerability in his voice made Clara's throat tight. I'm really staying. For a month, like I promised. A whole month. He said it like a prayer, like a wish he was afraid to believe in. That's 30 days. 31, actually. It's July. His face brightened. Even better. Then suddenly shy, he added, I'm glad you're here, even if Papa's being all grumpy about it. Your Papa has a right to his feelings, Clara said gently. The situation isn't easy for him. Nothing's easy for him anymore. Noah's small shoulders sagged. He used to laugh before. He used to throw me up in the air and catch me, and he'd dance with Mama in the kitchen when he thought I wasn't looking. Now he just works and sleeps and looks tired all the time. Clara rose from the bed and crossed to the boy. She crouched down to his level, hands on his shoulders. Noah, listen to me. Your Papa is grieving. That takes time, maybe a long time. And nothing I do here, nothing you do can make that grief go away. Do you understand? His eyes filled with tears. Then what's the point? If you can't make him better, why did I send for you? Because sometimes people who are grieving need help with the everyday things. The cooking, the cleaning, the teaching. Those things don't heal grief, but they make it easier to survive while the healing happens on its own. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. And sometimes lonely people just need to know they're not alone. That counts for something too. Noah nodded slowly, processing. Are you lonely, Miss Whitman? Very, Clara admitted, but I'm hoping that might change. The boy threw his arms around her neck in an impulsive hug that nearly knocked her backward. She steadied herself and held him, this small, fierce soul who'd reached across a continent for hope. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet but determined. I'll help you, he said, with whatever you need. I'm real good at carrying things and I know where everything is, and I can show you how the stove works because it's tricky sometimes. I'd appreciate that very much. They went downstairs together, Noah chattering about the ranch and the animals and which chickens were the meanest. The kitchen was brighter in the morning light, though it did nothing to hide the accumulated grime. Ethan stood at the stove, his back to them, working a cast-iron skillet over the fire. The smell of frying bacon filled the air. Sit, he said without turning around. Food's almost ready. Claire settled at the table, noting the 3 mismatched plates already set out, the bent forks, the cups that didn't match. Noah climbed onto the chair beside her, swinging his legs. Ethan brought the skillet to the table and scraped eggs and bacon onto their plates with economical movements. The eggs were overcooked, the bacon slightly burned, but Clara's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's meager train meal. Thank you, she said. Ethan grunted and took his own seat. They ate in silence for several minutes, the scrape of forks the only sound. Noah kept glancing between them, clearly wanting to talk, but unsure if he should. Finally, Ethan spoke. I start work at sunrise. Usually don't come back until noon for a quick meal, then I'm out again until sunset. Sometimes later if there's trouble. What kind of trouble? Clara asked. Fence repairs. Sick cattle. Predators. Ranch work is never finished. He pushed eggs around his plate. Point is, you'll be on your own most of the day. You and Noah. I understand. There's food in the cold cellar, not much variety, but enough. You can cook whatever you want, use whatever you need. He paused. I'm not particular. I noticed, Clara said mildly, glancing at the burned bacon. Ethan's eyes snapped to hers, surprised, and for just a moment she saw something that might have been amusement flicker across his face. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. There's a garden out back, he continued. It's overgrown. If you want to salvage it, feel free. I'd like that. Town's 3 miles east, general store, post office, church. You can take the wagon if you need supplies, but he hesitated. Might be better to keep your visits limited, at least for now. Because of the gossip, Clara understood, because her presence here was already scandalous enough without her parading through town. I'll be discreet. Appreciate it. Ethan stood, draining the last of his coffee. I'll be working the north pasture today. If you need anything urgent, ring the bell by the barn. 3 times. I'll hear it. He grabbed his hat from the peg by the door and was gone before Clara could respond. The door banged shut behind him, and the house seemed to exhale. Noah looked at her with apologetic eyes. He's not always this unfriendly. Just mostly. Clara almost laughed. It's all right. We have work to do anyway. Finish your breakfast, then show me where your mother kept the cleaning supplies. The boy's face lit up. You're really going to clean? From top to bottom, Clara confirmed. This house deserves better than dust and neglect. They spent the morning in a flurry of activity. Clara found rags and soap and a bucket with a hole in it that still held water if you were careful. She tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and attacked the grime with determined efficiency. Noah helped enthusiastically, if not always effectively, chattering constantly about the ranch, his mother, the town, anything and everything his 7-year-old mind touched upon. Mama used to sing when she cleaned, he said, watching Clara scrub the kitchen floor. Said it made the work go faster. What did she sing? All kinds of things. Church songs, mostly. And sometimes this one about a girl waiting by a river. He hummed a few bars, off-key but sweet. Clara recognized the melody, an old ballad about love and loss and waiting. I know that one, she said softly. My mother sang it too. Will you sing it? Maybe later. Right now, I need to focus on getting this floor clean enough to eat off. Why would we eat off the floor? Noah asked, genuinely puzzled. Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. It's just an expression. It means very clean. By midday, the kitchen showed remarkable improvement. The windows gleamed, the floor was scrubbed, the dishes were washed and stacked neatly. Clara's back ached and her hands were raw, but the transformation filled her with quiet satisfaction. This at least she could control. This she could fix. Noah stood in the doorway, surveying their work with wide eyes. It looks like it used to when Mama was alive. Does that make you sad? Clara asked carefully. He considered this with the seriousness children brought to difficult questions. A little, but also glad. Like maybe she can see it somehow and know we didn't forget how nice she made things. Clara's eyes stung with sudden tears. She turned away, busying herself with wringing out rags. I'm sure she knows, sweetheart. They ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese. Then Clara turned her attention to Noah's education. She found a few battered primers in a trunk upstairs, along with a slate and chalk. They settled at the cleaned kitchen table, and Clara assessed what he knew. The answer was, not much. He could write his name in crooked letters and recognize a handful of words, but his father had been too busy and too grief-stricken to provide consistent teaching. Clara started with the basics, patient and encouraging as Noah struggled through simple exercises. I'm not good at this, he said after the fifth failed attempt to spell horse. You're learning. That's different than being good, or bad at something. Clara guided his hand, forming the letters. Your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Really? Really. And you're very smart, Noah, I can tell. You just need practice. He beamed at her, soaking up the praise like parched earth soaking up rain. They worked for another hour until his attention began to wander, then Clara released him to his afternoon chores. She watched through the window as he ran toward the chicken coop, his earlier dejection replaced by boyish energy. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Clara tackled the parlor, beating dust from cushions, sweeping corners, opening windows to air out the staleness. She found photographs in a drawer carefully wrapped in cloth. A woman with kind eyes and dark hair smiled from the frames. Noah's mother. She looked young, vibrant, alive. Clara studied the images, trying to imagine the woman who'd made this house a home, who'd sung while she cleaned, who danced with her husband in the kitchen. She rewrapped the photographs and placed them back in the drawer. It wasn't her place to display them. That was Ethan's decision to make. By the time the sun started its descent, Clara had worked herself into exhaustion. Her dress was soaked with sweat, her hair had come loose from its pins, and her muscles screamed protest with every movement. But the house? The house looked transformed. Not perfect, not yet, but alive again. Cared for. She started dinner, working with the limited ingredients she found. Potatoes, onions, a bit of salt pork. Nothing fancy, but she made it work, letting instinct and old memories guide her hands. Her mother had been a wonderful cook, able to transform the simplest ingredients into something nourishing and good. Clara had inherited some of that skill. Ethan returned as she was setting the table. He stopped in the doorway, and she watched his eyes widen as he took in the changes. The clean floor, the gleaming windows, the smell of actual cooking instead of just fried meat. You've been busy, he said finally. That's what you're paying me for. He removed his hat, hung it on the peg, then stood awkwardly as if unsure what to do in his own kitchen. You didn't have to do all this in one day. I had the time and the energy. Seemed wasteful not to use both. Clara ladled stew into bowls. Dinner's ready. Noah's washing up. They ate together again, the silence less oppressive than that morning, but still weighted with things unsaid. Noah filled the gaps with stories about the chickens and how he'd found 2 new eggs, and could they have them for breakfast tomorrow? If Miss Whitman doesn't mind cooking them, Ethan said. I don't mind. After dinner, Ethan retreated to the barn for evening chores. Noah helped Clara clean the dishes, drying them with exaggerated care and stacking them exactly as she showed him. You're a quick learner, Clara observed. I want to do it right, so you'll stay. Noah, I already promised I'd stay a month. You don't have to earn it. But what if you change your mind? The anxiety in his voice was palpable. What if you decide it's too hard, or Papa's too mean, or you just don't like it here? Clara set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him fully. Look at me. She waited until his worried eyes met hers. I made a promise. I don't break promises. Not to you, not to your father, not to anyone. Do you believe me? He searched her face, looking for truth. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. I believe you. Good. Now, how about you show me where the soap goes, and then maybe we can read together before bed? His whole face transformed. Really? You'll read to me? If you'd like. Mama used to read to me every night, stories about knights and dragons and brave princesses. His voice went soft with memory. Papa tried a few times after she died, but he'd get all choked up and have to stop. Eventually, he just quit trying. What if I read to you and you follow along? That way you can practice your letters. Noah practically vibrated with excitement. Yes! I'll get the book! He raced upstairs and returned moments later clutching a worn volume of fairy tales. They settled together on the parlor sofa, Clara reading slowly and clearly while Noah's finger traced the words. His enthusiasm far outpaced his ability, but his effort was genuine. When he stumbled over difficult words, Clara helped without making him feel foolish. They were deep into a story about a clever girl outwitting a giant when the front door opened. Ethan stepped inside, stopped short at the sight of them, then moved quietly toward the stairs. Papa, Noah called. Miss Whitman's reading to me. Want to listen? Ethan paused with one foot on the bottom step. You should be heading to bed soon. Just one more story, please? Noah, let him finish this one, Clara interjected quietly. We're almost to the end. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd refuse, assert his authority, send the boy to bed out of sheer stubbornness. But then he gave a curt nod and lowered himself into the chair across from them, his movements stiff with discomfort. Clara continued reading, acutely aware of his presence. She could feel his eyes on them, watching, assessing. Noah leaned against her side, completely absorbed in the story, occasionally gasping at exciting parts or laughing at the giant's foolishness. When she reached the final page, when the clever girl triumphed and returned home to her grateful family, Noah sighed with satisfaction. That was perfect. Time for bed, Ethan said, standing. School day tomorrow with Miss Whitman. Can we do reading again tomorrow night? Noah asked, looking between them hopefully. We'll see, Clara said. Now go on, brush your teeth and say your prayers. Noah hugged her quickly, impulsively, then scampered toward the stairs. At the landing, he paused. Good night, Papa. Good night, Miss Whitman. Good night, Noah, they answered in unison. The boy disappeared upstairs, and silence descended. Clara set the book aside and stood, smoothing her skirt. I should retire as well. It's been a long day. Miss Whitman, Ethan's voice stopped her. About earlier, the reading. Yes? He struggled for words, his jaw working. He hasn't been that happy in a long time. He's a sweet boy. He deserves happiness. I know that. Ethan's voice held an edge of defensiveness. You think I don't know that? I think you're doing the best you can with an impossible situation, Clara said carefully. But grief makes us forget things, like how to read bedtime stories, like how to let ourselves enjoy small moments. You've been here one day. His eyes flashed. Don't presume to know what I've forgotten. You're right. I apologize. Clara held his gaze. But I've been where Noah is. I lost both my parents within 6 months of each other. I know what it's like to watch the surviving parent disappear into their sadness while you're left trying to hold the pieces together alone. Ethan's expression shifted, surprise replacing anger. You lost both parents. When I was 19, my father went first, his heart. My mother followed shortly after. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think it was a broken heart. Claire's voice steadied despite the old pain. I understand loss, Mr. Cole. Maybe not in the same way you do, but I understand it well enough. He was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know. How could you? We've barely spoken. She moved toward the stairs. I'll see you at breakfast. This time, he didn't stop her. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Ethan left before dawn and returned after dusk, speaking little, eating what she cooked without complaint or comment. Noah became her constant companion during daylight hours, eager to learn, starved for attention and affection. They worked through lessons in reading and arithmetic, tended the salvageable parts of the garden, cleaned room by room until the whole house shone. Claire discovered she had a talent for creating structure from chaos. Each day she made lists, established routines, found small ways to improve their circumstances. She mended Noah's torn clothes and discovered a sewing basket full of fabric scraps. She coaxed vegetables from the neglected garden. She learned the temperaments of the chickens and which cows were gentle enough for Noah to approach. The work exhausted her, but it also filled something hollow inside. She was needed here, useful. More than she'd been in years of lonely teaching positions where children came and went like tide water, leaving no lasting mark. On Sunday afternoon, her promised time alone, Clara walked out past the pastures until the ranch buildings were distant shapes on the horizon. She found a spot beneath a twisted cottonwood tree and sat in the grass, letting the wind wash over her. The sky stretched enormous and blue, unmarked by city smoke or crowded buildings. The silence was profound. She thought about Philadelphia, her tiny room, her students who barely knew her name, the crushing anonymity of city life. And she thought about this strange new existence, a month-long trial in a stranger's home, caring for a grieving child and tiptoeing around a man who wore his pain like armor. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd read those letters. The letters had promised partnership, family, belonging. What she'd found was more complicated, harder, but also perhaps more real. She didn't regret coming. That surprised her. When she returned to the house as the sun dipped low, she found Noah on the porch steps, clearly waiting. His face brightened when he saw her. "I was worried you left for good. I told you I'd be back before dinner." "I know, but—" He shrugged, unable to articulate his fear. Clara sat beside him on the step. "Noah, I know trust is hard when people keep leaving, but I'm not going anywhere, not yet. But eventually you will, when the month's up." It was the truth, and Clara couldn't bring herself to lie. "Maybe. Or maybe your father and I will agree I should stay longer. We won't know until we get there." "What if I asked you to stay forever? Would you?" The question pierced her heart. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because your father has to want that too, and right now he's just trying to survive each day." Noah picked at a splinter on the step. "Do you think he'll ever be happy again?" "I think happiness comes back slowly after great sadness, in small pieces, like watching you read a whole sentence without help, or tasting good food, or hearing you laugh." Clara bumped his shoulder gently. "It takes time." "I wish I could make it go faster." "I know, but you can't. None of us can." They sat together as the shadows lengthened, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and purple. It was peaceful in a way that made Clara's chest ache, this strange, complicated, temporary peace. The peace shattered 3 days later when the first visitor arrived. Clara was in the garden, pulling weeds and trying to save the squash plants, when she heard a wagon approaching. Noah ran to investigate, then came racing back, eyes wide. "Miss Whitman, there's a lady coming, a fancy lady." Clara straightened, wiping dirt from her hands. A fancy lady was the last thing she'd expected. She walked around the house to find an elegant carriage pulling into the yard, far nicer than any vehicle she'd seen since arriving. The woman who descended wore a dress that cost more than Clara made in 6 months, her hair arranged in perfect curls beneath a fashionable hat. She was beautiful, polished. Everything Clara was not. "You must be Miss Whitman," the woman said, her voice cultured and cool. "I'm Margaret Thornberry. My father owns the land adjacent to this property." "Pleased to meet you." Clara was acutely aware of her dirt-stained dress, her wind-tangled hair. Margaret's eyes swept over her with barely concealed disdain. "I heard the most interesting story in town, about a mail-order bride who arrived uninvited. I simply had to see for myself if it was true." The words landed like slaps. Clara kept her expression neutral. "I'm here as a housekeeper and teacher for Noah. Nothing more." "Of course." Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How very charitable of you, and of Ethan, to take in a woman of uncertain reputation." My reputation is my own concern. Perhaps, but Ethan's is mine. Margaret stepped closer, her voice dropping. We've had an understanding, he and I, since before his wife died, a respectable arrangement between two established families. Clara's stomach dropped. I wasn't aware. Why would you be? You're only the help, after all. Margaret's smile sharpened. But I thought you should know where things stand. Ethan will eventually need a proper wife. Someone who can navigate society, who understands this world. Not some desperate woman who answered a child's pitiful letters. The cruelty was breathtaking. Clara fought to keep her voice steady. If you and Mr. Cole have an understanding, perhaps you should discuss it with him. Oh, I will. We're having dinner tomorrow evening. A private dinner, you understand. You'll need to make yourself scarce. Take the boy to town or something. Mr. Cole hasn't mentioned any dinner plans. He will. Margaret gathered her skirts. I do hope you enjoy your month here, Miss Whitman. I'm sure it's quite an adventure for someone of your background. But don't get too comfortable. Some situations are simply too good to last. She swept back to her carriage with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. Clara stood frozen, watching her leave, Margaret's words echoing in her mind. An understanding, a respectable arrangement. Don't get too comfortable. Noah appeared at her side, taking her hand. I don't like her. She's mean. She's just protecting what she thinks is hers, Clara murmured. But Papa's not hers. He's ours. The possessive ours made Clara's throat tight. It's complicated, Noah. That evening, when Ethan came in for dinner, Clara waited until Noah was occupied with his food before speaking. You had a visitor today, Margaret Thornberry. Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Margaret came here? She wanted to meet me, and to inform me that you two have plans tomorrow evening. His jaw tightened. I don't have any plans. She seemed quite certain. Well, she's wrong. Ethan set down his fork with more force than necessary. Margaret has certain expectations. They're not expectations I share. She said you had an understanding. We don't. His voice was flat, final. Her father would like us to marry, combine the properties, create some kind of ranching empire. Margaret goes along with it because she wants to be married, and I'm the most eligible widower around. He met Clara's eyes. But I've never encouraged her. I've been clear about that. She doesn't seem to have heard you. Then I'll be clear. He pushed back from the table. If she shows up tomorrow, tell her I'm busy. Tell her I'm busy every day for the foreseeable future. Mr. Cole, I mean it. His eyes flashed. I didn't ask for her interference any more than I asked for yours. The difference is, you're actually useful. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but coming from Ethan, it felt like one. Clara nodded. I'll handle it if she returns. But Margaret didn't return the next day. Instead, the gossip did. Noah came back from collecting eggs with news that Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch had stopped by the property line to chat. Her chat had consisted entirely of thinly veiled questions about Clara's relationship with Ethan and pointed comments about propriety. She said people are talking, Noah reported, his voice small. She said it's not right, you being here, that it looks bad. Clara's hand stilled over the bread dough she was kneading. What did you tell her? That you're my teacher and you're helping Papa and it's none of her business. He looked up anxiously. Was that wrong? No, sweetheart. That was exactly right. Clara resumed kneading, channeling her frustration into the dough. People will always talk, especially about things they don't understand. But the talking grew louder. Over the next week, Clara felt it every time she ventured near town. The stares, the whispers, women pulling their children closer as if respectability might be contagious, men leering with assumptions she hated. She bore it silently, chin high, meeting their eyes with calm dignity. But it wore on her, grinding down her confidence like water on stone. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning when she took Noah to the general store for supplies. The proprietor, Mr. Hendricks, had always been cordially polite. This time, he looked right through her. I'll need these items, please, Clara said, placing her list on the counter. Hendricks studied the list without touching it. This going on the Cole account? Yes. And you're authorized to make purchases? Mr. Cole sent me specifically for these supplies. Hendricks pursed his lips. Problem is, I've had some complaints. Customers who'd rather not shop alongside certain individuals. The meaning was clear. Clara felt her face flush hot. I'm simply buying flour and sugar, Mr. Hendricks. I fail to see how that offends anyone. It's not what you're buying, it's what you represent. He lowered his voice. Look, I got nothing personal against you, but business is business, and having an unmarried woman living in sin with Ethan Cole, I am not living in sin. Clara's voice rang out, loud enough to turn heads throughout the store. I am employed as a housekeeper and governess. There's nothing improper about my situation. Maybe, maybe not, Hendricks shrugged. But perception matters in a small town, and the perception is that Ethan Cole's playing house with a desperate woman who threw herself at him. The words hit like physical blows. Clara gripped the counter, fighting to breathe through the rage and humiliation. Behind her, she heard Noah's sharp intake of breath. My father is a good man, the boy shouted. And Miss Whitman is good too. You're just mean and stupid. Noah, Clara tried to quiet him. No. Tears streamed down his face. I'm tired of people being mean. They don't know anything. They don't know how sad we were, or how much better everything is now, or how you make Papa smile sometimes, even though he tries to hide it. The store had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on the crying child and the humiliated woman beside him. Clara made a decision. She straightened her spine, took Noah's hand, and walked toward the door. Miss Whitman, your supplies by... Keep them, Clara said without turning around. And tell your customers they're welcome to their gossip, but they'll answer for it eventually. Small-minded cruelty always comes back around. They drove home in silence, Noah hiccuping with residual tears, Clara's hands white-knuckled on the reins. When they arrived, Ethan was in the yard sharpening tools. He took one look at their faces and stood. What happened? Nothing, Clara said. Noah? The boy burst into fresh tears and ran for the house. Ethan's eyes swung back to Clara. What happened? So she told him. All of it. Hendricks' refusal, the accusations, Noah's outburst. She kept her voice level, clinical, as if reporting facts about someone else's life. Because if she let emotion in, she'd shatter. Ethan's face grew darker with every word. When she finished, his hands were clenched into fists. I'll handle this, he said, voice dangerously quiet. There's nothing to handle. It's just gossip. We knew it would happen. Gossip is one thing. Publicly humiliating you is another. He strode toward the barn. I'm going to town. Mr. Cole, please. I should have done this weeks ago. He threw a saddle onto his horse with savage efficiency. Should have made things clear from the start instead of hiding out here like a coward. What are you going to do? He swung up into the saddle, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Clara saw fire in his eyes instead of ash. I'm going to remind this town that Ethan Cole doesn't answer to their judgment, and neither do the people under my protection. He rode hard toward town, the horse's hooves throwing up dust that hung in the air like smoke. Clara watched until he disappeared over the ridge, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. Men defending a woman's honor in small towns could either silence gossip or ignite it into wildfire. Noah emerged from the house, eyes red and swollen. Is Papa going to yell at Mr. Hendricks? I don't know what he's going to do. Clara pulled the boy close. But whatever happens, it's not your fault. You understand? None of this is your fault. It feels like it is. If I hadn't sent those letters, you wouldn't be here getting hurt. If you hadn't sent those letters, I'd still be in Philadelphia, teaching children who didn't care and coming home to an empty room every night. Clara tilted his chin up so he had to meet her eyes. You gave me a chance at something better. Whatever price comes with that, I'll pay it willingly. They went inside together and tried to occupy themselves with normal tasks. Clara attempted to bake bread, but her hands shook too badly to knead properly. Noah sat at the table with his primer, staring at the same page for 20 minutes without turning it. The minutes crawled past like wounded things. Ethan returned as the sun touched the western mountains, his face unreadable. He dismounted slowly, methodically unsaddled his horse, and walked to the house with measured steps. Clara met him at the door, searching his expression for clues. Well? She asked when the silence became unbearable. It's handled. What does that mean? He brushed past her into the kitchen, poured water from the pump, and drank deeply before answering. I had a conversation with Hendricks. Made it clear that you speak for this household and your credit is as good as mine. He won't refuse you again. And the rest of it, the accusations? Ethan set down the cup with careful precision. I may have mentioned that spreading lies about my employees would result in me taking my business elsewhere, permanently, and that I'd encourage my neighbors to do the same. You threatened him. I stated facts. His jaw was set, stubborn. Hendricks runs the only general store for 20 miles. He needs customers more than we need his particular store. He understood the economics. Clara sank into a chair, torn between relief and worry. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Ethan finally looked at her directly, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. You came here on good faith. You've worked harder than anyone I've ever hired. You've brought my son back to life when I'd given up on the possibility. I'll be damned if I let small-minded gossips drive you away because they've got nothing better to do than speculate about other people's business. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward, changing the shape of everything. Clara felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. I should have done it 3 weeks ago. He moved toward the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Whitman, you were right. At the station, that first day, I was a coward, hiding from grief, from responsibility, from every damn thing that mattered. But I'm done hiding. He climbed the stairs before she could respond, leaving Clara alone with the weight of his confession. That night, sleep eluded her completely. She lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle and creak, her mind churning. Ethan's defense had bought them breathing room, but it couldn't erase the fundamental problem. She was an unmarried woman living under his roof. No matter how proper their arrangement, no matter how many witnesses swore to her virtue, the situation remained scandalous. 1 month, they'd agreed. 2 weeks remained. And then what? The question haunted her through the following days. The gossip didn't stop, but it grew more cautious, confined to whispers behind hands rather than open confrontation. Clara continued her work, teaching Noah, managing the household, coaxing the garden into reluctant productivity. But she felt the clock ticking down, counting off hours until decision time. Ethan remained distant but less hostile. He thanked her for meals, commented on the improvements to the house, even sat with them one evening while Clara read to Noah, though he said nothing and left as soon as the story ended. Small things, incremental things, but after weeks of cold silence, they felt monumental. On a Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks before her trial month ended, a rider arrived bearing official-looking papers. Clara was hanging laundry when Noah came running. Miss Whitman, there's a man here with documents for Papa. He looks important. Clara wiped her hands and followed him to the yard where a stern-faced man in a city suit sat atop a black horse. Ethan emerged from the barn, squinting against the sun. Ethan Cole? The man asked. That's me. I'm Lawrence Finch, Land Office Inspector. He dismounted and pulled papers from his saddlebag. I'm here to conduct an assessment of your homestead claim. Ethan's expression went carefully blank. Assessment? I proved up on this land 3 years ago, filed all the proper paperwork. New territorial guidelines require periodic review of claims, particularly those involving moral fitness. Finch's tone was bureaucratic, disinterested. There have been complaints filed regarding the moral character of this household. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. Beside her, Noah pressed against her side. What kind of complaints? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. Anonymous complaints alleging violation of decency standards, specifically the housing of an unmarried woman in a manner suggesting impropriety. Finch consulted his papers. According to Territorial Statute 14-7, homestead claims can be revoked if the claimant demonstrates persistent moral failings that render them unfit for land stewardship. That's insane, Clara burst out. I'm an employee, a housekeeper and teacher. There's nothing immoral about that arrangement. Finch barely glanced at her. Perhaps not in theory, but perception matters in frontier communities. The territory has standards to uphold. Whose standards? Ethan stepped forward, hands clenched. Who filed these complaints? As I said, they're anonymous, but multiple sources have raised concerns. Finch tucked the papers back into his bag. I'll be conducting interviews in town over the next few days, speaking with neighbors, business owners, community leaders. If the assessment concludes that moral violations have occurred, you'll have 30 days to remedy the situation before revocation proceedings begin. This is ridiculous, Ethan said. You can't take a man's land because of gossip. The law says we can, Mr. Cole, and we will if circumstances warrant. Finch remounted his horse. I suggest you consider your options carefully. There are solutions, of course. Proper marriage would eliminate all concerns, or dismissal of the woman in question. Either would satisfy the moral requirements. He rode away, leaving them standing in shocked silence. Clara felt numb, disconnected from her body. This couldn't be happening. Anonymous complaints, moral violations, threats to take Ethan's land because she dared to work here. It's Margaret, Ethan said flatly, or her father. This has their fingerprints all over it. It doesn't matter who filed the complaint. Clara's voice sounded strange in her own ears. What matters is that I'm destroying your life, your livelihood, everything your wife built with you. Don't! Ethan's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare make this your fault. Isn't it? If I'd just gone back to Philadelphia that first day, then Noah would still be drowning in loneliness, and I'd still be working myself to death to avoid feeling anything. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from every line of his body. You heard what he said. Marriage or dismissal. Those are the only options that satisfy their precious moral standards. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Then I'll leave. Today. Right now. Before the assessment is complete. That should be enough to— No! Noah's voice cut through her words. He stood rigid, small fists clenched at his sides. You promised you'd stay a month. You promised. Sweetheart, circumstances have changed. I don't care. Tears streamed down his face. Everyone leaves. Mama left, and now you're leaving, and soon Papa will be so sad he'll leave too, even if his body stays, and I'll be all alone again. Noah! Ethan reached for him, but the boy jerked away. I hate this. I hate all of it. He ran toward the house, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frame. Clara and Ethan stood in the empty yard, the dust settling around them. A hawk circled overhead, crying out in a voice that sounded like grief. There's a third option, Clara said finally, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. The one Finch mentioned. Marriage. Ethan's head snapped toward her. What? Not a real marriage. Not in any meaningful sense. She kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, unable to look at him. A legal arrangement, partnership for practical purposes. It would satisfy the moral requirements, protect your claim, and give Noah the stability he needs. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. She finally met his eyes. Think about it logically. You need someone to manage the household and teach Noah. I need employment and a place to belong. Marriage would legitimize what we're already doing and silence the gossip permanently. Marriage is sacred, Ethan said roughly. It's vows and promises and sometimes it's survival, Clara interrupted. My grandmother married my grandfather after her first husband died in a mining accident. She had 3 children to feed and he needed help on his farm. They were honest about what it was, a practical arrangement between 2 people who respected each other. They built a good life. Eventually, they even built love. Eventually, Ethan's voice was hollow. After how long? Does it matter? We're not talking about love, Mr. Cole. We're talking about solving a problem that threatens everything you've worked for. Clara steadied her voice. I'm offering a solution, a fair one. You get to keep your land and Noah gets stability. I get security and purpose. No one has to leave. No one has to lose anything. Except freedom. What freedom? You're already trapped by grief and work and judgment. I'm trapped by poverty and gossip and lack of options. She stepped closer. At least this trap would have some dignity to it. Ethan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You'd really do this? Bind yourself legally to a man you barely know, in a marriage that's nothing but paperwork, just to solve my problem? It's not just your problem anymore, it's mine too. The moment I stepped off that train, it became mine. Clara lifted her chin. And yes, I'd do it. I'd rather be a wife in name only than go back to the life I left behind. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Ethan searched her face, looking for something she couldn't name. "I need time," he said finally. "To think, to—" He shook his head. "This isn't a decision to make lightly. We don't have much time. Finch will complete his assessment within days." "I know." Ethan's voice was rough. "But if we do this, it has to be because we're both certain, not because we're backed into a corner by threats and gossip." He walked toward the barn, shoulders bowed under invisible weight. Clara watched him go, her heart beating hard enough to hurt. She'd just proposed marriage to a grieving widower who could barely stand to look at her most days. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so desperately high. She found Noah in his room, curled on his bed facing the wall. Clara sat on the edge of the mattress and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry I upset you," she said softly. "You're leaving." His voice was muffled by the pillow. "You're going to leave like everyone leaves." "I'm trying very hard not to leave. That's what Papa and I were discussing." Noah rolled over, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Really?" "Really. But it's complicated. There are rules about unmarried women living with widowers, and some people think those rules are being broken. That's stupid." "Perhaps. But stupid or not, we have to deal with the consequences." Clara smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "The thing is, there might be a way to make this work, a way for me to stay permanently, but it would require some big changes." "What kind of changes?" Clara took a breath. "What would you think if your papa and I got married?" Noah sat bolt upright. "Married? Like Mama and Papa were married?" "Sort of, but different." "How did you explain a marriage of convenience to a 7-year-old?" "It would be a partnership. Your papa and I would be married legally, which would solve all the problems with me living here. But we'd still be the same people doing the same things we do now, running the ranch, teaching you, managing the household." "Would you be my new mama?" The question pierced Clara's heart. "I could never replace your mama, Noah." "No one could, but I could be someone who loves you and takes care of you and is always here when you need her, if that's something you'd want." He considered this with the seriousness children brought to life-altering questions. "Would you still read to me at night?" "Every night." "And teach me letters?" "Every day." "And make the house smell good and laugh when I tell jokes, even when they're not funny?" Clara's eyes burned with tears. "Yes to all of those things." Noah threw his arms around her neck. "Then I want it. I want you to stay forever and ever." "It's not decided yet," Clara warned, even as she held him close. "Your papa needs to agree too, and this is a very big decision for him." "He'll say yes." Noah pulled back, absolutely confident. "He has to, because you make everything better." If only it were that simple. That evening, Ethan didn't come in for dinner. Clara and Noah ate alone, the empty chair at the table a stark reminder of the decision hanging over them. After Noah went to bed, Clara sat in the parlor with mending she couldn't focus on, waiting. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, each second stretching into eternity. Ethan finally entered just before midnight, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He stopped when he saw her still awake. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." Clara set aside her mending. "Have you decided?" "I've been thinking about Sarah." His wife's name, spoken aloud for the first time since Clara arrived. "About what she'd want, what she'd think of all this." Clara waited, afraid to breathe. She was practical. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "People thought she married me for love, and maybe she did eventually, but at first, I was a struggling rancher, and she was a teacher whose school was closing. We made a deal. She'd help build the ranch. I'd give her security and a home. Love came later after years of working side by side, learning each other's rhythms." "That sounds like a good marriage," Clara said carefully. "It was, until fever took her and left me drowning." Ethan sat in the chair across from her, elbows on his knees, head bowed. "I told myself I'd never marry again, couldn't bear the thought of replacing her. But tonight, staring at these walls, thinking about losing this land, about failing Noah, about watching you pack your bags and disappear." He raised his head, met her eyes. I realized I'm more afraid of that than I am of marriage. Clara's heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying yes. The words came slowly, weighted with significance. But I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. I can't promise love. I can't promise romance or passion or any of the things a woman deserves from marriage. I'm still half dead inside, and I don't know if that will ever change. I'm not asking for love, Clara said, though the words hurt more than she expected. I'm asking for partnership, honesty, respect. Those things I can give. Ethan leaned back, studying her. We'd need rules, boundaries. This would be a business arrangement, legal and binding, but practical in nature. Agreed. What kind of boundaries? Separate rooms, separate lives in most respects. You'd manage the household and teach Noah. I'd run the ranch. We'd present a united front to the town, but in private, he paused. In private, we'd be colleagues, not husband and wife in any real sense. It was exactly what Clara had proposed, but hearing it stated so baldly made her chest ache with unexpected loss. Still, she nodded. That seems fair. If circumstances change, if either of us becomes unhappy with the arrangement, we'd discuss it honestly. No pretending, no martyrdom. Agreed. And Noah. Ethan's voice softened. He can't get his hopes up about us becoming a real family. A father and mother in love. He needs to understand this is different. He's 7, Clara said gently. He'll hope regardless of what we tell him, but we can be honest about the nature of our partnership. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I suppose we're engaged. The word sounded foreign, almost ridiculous given the circumstances. Clara nearly laughed, but the sound died in her throat when she saw Ethan's expression. He looked terrified and resigned in equal measure, a man stepping off a cliff because the alternative was drowning. When? She asked. Soon, before Finch completes his assessment. Tomorrow, if possible. The circuit judge passes through Drywell Crossing every Friday. If we catch him, we can make this legal before anyone can interfere. Tomorrow. Clara's mind reeled. 24 hours from now, she'd be married to a man who'd rejected her on a train platform 5 weeks ago. A man who still loved his dead wife. A man who was only agreeing to this to save his land and satisfy bureaucratic moral requirements. All right, she heard herself say. Tomorrow. Ethan stood, moving toward the stairs with heavy steps. At the landing, he paused. Miss Whitman? Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. It sounded strange in his rough voice, intimate despite the distance between them. Yes? Thank you for offering this, for being willing to... He struggled for words. You're saving more than just the land. You know that, right? I hope so, Clara whispered. He climbed the stairs, leaving her alone in the lamplight. She sat for a long time, staring at her hands, trying to process what she'd set in motion. Tomorrow she'd become Clara Cole, wife to a widower, stepmother to a grieving boy, partner in a marriage built on necessity rather than love. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of as a girl, but girls' dreams rarely survived contact with the harsh realities of women's lives. This was what she had. This was what she'd choose, and she would make it enough. The next morning broke clear and cold despite the summer season. Clara rose before dawn and dressed in her best dress, a simple blue cotton she'd brought from Philadelphia. It wasn't a wedding dress, but it would have to do. She braided her hair carefully, pinned it up, and stared at her reflection in the small mirror. She looked the same. That seemed wrong somehow. Shouldn't a woman look different on her wedding day? Noah knocked softly, then peeked in. His eyes widened when he saw her. You look pretty, Miss Whitman. Thank you, sweetheart. Clara turned from the mirror. Are you ready? I think so. He fidgeted with his shirt buttons. Is it wrong that I'm excited? Mama's only been gone a year and I'm excited about you marrying Papa. Clara knelt in front of him, taking his hands. Your mama would want you to be happy. She'd want all of us to be happy. This isn't replacing her or forgetting her, it's just moving forward. There's a difference. Will you tell me about her sometimes? About Mama? If your papa's willing to share those stories, I'd love to hear them too. They found Ethan already in the kitchen, dressed in what must have been his wedding suit from years ago. It was slightly tight across the shoulders, showing how much hard labor had broadened his frame. He looked uncomfortable and formal and achingly vulnerable. "The wagon's ready," he said without preamble. "Judge Morton agreed to marry us at the courthouse at 9 o'clock. We should leave soon." The ride to town was silent except for Noah's occasional questions, which both adults answered in monosyllables. Clara watched the landscape roll past and tried not to think about the enormity of what they were about to do. Legal. Binding. Permanent. Unless it wasn't. Unless they hated it. Hated. Unless... She cut off the spiraling thoughts. No point borrowing trouble from an uncertain future. Drywell Crossings Courthouse was a modest stone building that also served as the land office and jail. Judge Morton waited on the steps, a portly man with kind eyes and a practical demeanor. 2 witnesses stood beside him, locals Clara vaguely recognized from church. "Mr. Cole, Miss Whitman." The judge nodded to each. "I understand you're here for a marriage ceremony." "Yes, sir," Ethan said. "And you're both entering this union of your own free will, with clear minds and honest intentions?" Clara and Ethan exchanged a glance. Honest intentions. Was pragmatic survival honest enough? "Yes," they said together. "Very well. Let's proceed." Judge Morton opened his book of ceremonies. "We'll keep this brief unless you prefer something more elaborate." "Brief is fine," Ethan said quickly. The ceremony was perfunctory, almost businesslike. Standard vows about commitment and partnership, nothing about love or passion or till death do them part. Clara was grateful for the omission. She could promise to honor and respect. Love felt like a bridge too far. When it came time for rings, Ethan fumbled in his pocket and produced a simple gold band. Not his first wife's ring, Clara noticed with relief. Something new, probably purchased hastily that morning. He slid it onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. It was too large, loose enough that Clara would need to wear it on her middle finger instead. But it was real. Solid. Proof of promises made. "By the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Morton closed his book with a definitive thud. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole." Mrs. Cole. The name settled over Clara like an unfamiliar coat, not quite fitting but serving its purpose. Ethan didn't kiss her. The omission was glaring, awkward, making the witnesses shift uncomfortably. But Clara was grateful. A kiss would have been a lie, and they'd promised each other honesty. They signed the papers in the judge's office, their signatures side by side making the union official. Mrs. Clara Cole. The ink was still wet when the door burst open and Lawrence Finch stormed in, face red with fury. "Judge Morton, I must protest this proceeding." The judge looked up calmly. "On what grounds, Mr. Finch?" "This marriage is a sham, a transparent attempt to circumvent territorial regulations regarding moral fitness." "Is that so?" Morton's eyebrows rose. "Do you have evidence that these 2 individuals are not genuinely married according to law?" "The timing is suspicious. Yesterday I informed them of the assessment. Today they're married. It's obvious manipulation." "What's obvious," Ethan said coldly, "is that you and whoever's pulling your strings are desperate to drive my wife from her home." "Well, she's not going anywhere. She's Mrs. Cole now, legal and proper. Your moral assessment has no grounds." Finch's face went purple. "The land office will investigate this marriage. If we find evidence of fraud..." "You'll find a man and woman legally wed before witnesses following all proper protocols," Judge Morton interrupted. "Unless you're suggesting I performed an illegal marriage ceremony, Mr. Finch." The land inspector sputtered but couldn't find words. Judge Morton smiled thinly. "I thought not. Good day, Mr. Finch. I believe your business here is concluded." Finch shot them all a venomous look before storming out. In the silence that followed, Noah giggled nervously. "He was really mad," the boy whispered. "He'll get over it," Judge Morton said. "Congratulations again, Mr. and Mrs. Cole. I hope you'll be very happy together." They thanked him and left, emerging into bright sunlight that felt too cheerful for the strange, businesslike event that had just transpired. Clara stared at the ring on her finger, trying to make it feel real. "We should tell people," Ethan said abruptly. "Get ahead of the gossip. Make it clear this is legitimate." "How?" Clara asked. "The church social, tomorrow afternoon. Everyone in town will be there." He met her eyes. We show up together, newly married, respectable. Dare anyone to say otherwise. It was a bold move, risky. But Clara understood the strategy. Control the narrative before the narrative controlled them. All right, she agreed. Tomorrow we make our first public appearance as husband and wife. Ethan nodded grimly. Tomorrow we face the wolves together. They drove home in silence, weighted with the enormity of what they'd done. Clara twisted the loose ring on her finger, the metal warm from her skin but foreign against her hand. Married. She was married to the man sitting rigid beside her, to the grieving widower who'd wanted nothing to do with her 6 weeks ago. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if her throat wasn't so tight with apprehension. Noah filled the quiet with his own brand of chatter, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from the adults. When we tell people tomorrow, will they be surprised? I bet Mrs. Patterson will nearly faint. She's always fainting at surprising news. Remember when the Hendersons' cow had twin calves? She fainted right there in the church aisle. That's enough, son, Ethan said, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. When they reached the ranch, Ethan helped Clara down from the wagon with careful formality, his hand steady under her elbow. The touch was brief, proper, and yet it sent awareness skittering up her arm. They were married now, legally bound. The thought made her dizzy. I need to check the north fence, Ethan said abruptly, already turning toward the barn. There's been coyote activity. It's past noon, Clara pointed out. You haven't eaten. I'll manage. He paused, not looking at her. You should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. Then he was gone, disappearing into the barn's shadow like a man fleeing something he couldn't name. Clara stood in the yard, the sun beating down on her shoulders, and felt the weight of their arrangement settle like stones in her chest. This was her marriage, this distance, this careful avoidance. She'd agreed to it, proposed it even, but standing here alone on her wedding day made the reality cut deeper than she'd anticipated. He's scared, Noah said softly, slipping his hand into hers. I know, sweetheart. Are you scared too? Clara looked down at the boy, at his two knowing eyes. A little. Change is always frightening, even when it's necessary. But you're not going to leave. No. I made promises today. I keep my promises. She squeezed his hand. Come on, let's make something special for dinner. Your papa needs to eat whether he admits it or not. They spent the afternoon cooking, Noah helping with genuine enthusiasm as Clara prepared the best meal she could manage with their limited supplies. Roasted chicken from their own coop, potatoes from the garden she'd coaxed back to life, biscuits that rose golden and perfect. Not a wedding feast, but a marker nonetheless. This day mattered, even if the marriage was built on practicality rather than romance. Ethan returned at sunset, dusty and exhausted. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the set table, the good dishes Clara had unearthed from a cabinet, the food arranged with care. What's this? His voice was rough. Dinner, Clara said simply. We should eat together, as a family. The word hung in the air between them, family. They weren't, not really, but they were pretending to be, and sometimes pretending was the first step toward truth. Ethan washed at the pump, then took his seat without comment. They ate in near silence, Noah the only one making conversation. The food was good, Clara knew it objectively, but it tasted like ash in her mouth. Every bite required conscious effort to swallow. When the meal ended, Ethan stood abruptly. I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give you space to settle in properly. That's not necessary, Clara said, confused. We agreed on separate rooms. I know what we agreed. His jaw was tight. But people talk. If anyone sees lights in 2 different rooms, if they get suspicious, he shook his head. It's better this way. Less complicated. Papa, you can't sleep in the barn, Noah protested. What if it's cold? What if... I'll be fine. Ethan grabbed his hat. I've slept in worse places. He looked at Clara, his expression unreadable. Lock the doors. I'll be in before dawn. He left before either of them could argue further. Noah's lower lip trembled, and Clara pulled him close. He needs time, she murmured, though the words felt hollow. This is hard for him. Everything's hard for him, Noah said bitterly. He makes everything harder than it has to be. Clara couldn't disagree. She got Noah ready for bed, read to him from his favorite book of fairy tales, and tucked him in with the usual rituals. But when she finally retreated to her own room, the room that had belonged to Ethan's first wife, the loneliness crashed over her like a wave. She'd gotten married today, spoken vows, become a wife, and she was spending her wedding night alone in a dead woman's bedroom while her husband hid in the barn. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry. Just for a few minutes, just enough to release the pressure building in her chest. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her spine, and reminded herself that she'd chosen this. She'd known what it was. A practical arrangement, a business partnership with legal documentation. If her heart had secretly hoped for more, well, that was her foolishness to manage. The next morning dawned bright and merciless. Clara woke to find Ethan already in the kitchen, coffee made, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were shadowed, his movements stiff with exhaustion. "Morning," he said without looking at her. "Good morning." Clara poured herself coffee, needing the fortification. "Are you still planning to attend the church social?" "Yes. We need to be seen together. Make this real in people's minds." He finally met her eyes. "Can you manage that? Pretending we're a normal married couple?" "Can you?" Clara shot back. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I'll do what's necessary." The social began at 2 o'clock on the church lawn, a monthly gathering where the town came together to eat, gossip, and judge their neighbors. Clara dressed carefully in her second-best dress, pinned her hair with extra care, and tried to calm her racing heart. This would be their first public appearance as Mr. and Mrs. Cole, the first test of their pretense. Noah bounced with excitement, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Everyone's going to be so surprised. Can I tell them? Can I be the one to say it?" "We'll make the announcement together," Ethan said. "All three of us." They arrived fashionably late, a strategic choice. Most of the town was already gathered, spread across blankets and clustered in conversation groups. Heads turned as the coal wagon rolled up. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Ethan helped Clara down with visible care, his hand firm at her waist. To anyone watching, it looked protective, proprietary. Only Clara felt the tension in his touch, the way his fingers trembled slightly before he released her. "Ready?" he murmured. "As I'll ever be." They walked together into the lion's den, Noah between them, their hands joined over his shoulders in a picture of familial unity. The conversations around them didn't just quiet, they died completely. Every eye fixed on them with undisguised shock. Margaret Thornberry stood near the dessert table, her face going white, then red as she took in the scene. Beside her, an older man who could only be her father, Samuel Thornberry, frowned deeply. Clara's former tormentor, Mr. Hendricks, stood with his wife, mouth actually hanging open. Mrs. Patterson clutched her husband's arm as if she might indeed faint. The minister, Reverend Walsh, approached with cautious steps. "Ethan, Miss Whitman," he said carefully, "we weren't expecting to see you both." "It's Mrs. Cole now, Reverend," Ethan said clearly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "We were married yesterday morning by Judge Morton. I wanted to introduce you all to my wife." The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret Thornberry made a sound between a gasp and a sob. Samuel Thornberry's face went apoplectic. "Married?" Mrs. Patterson's voice was shrill with disbelief. "But you barely know each other." "We know each other well enough," Clara said, lifting her chin. "I've been managing Mr. Cole's household for over a month. We developed mutual respect and decided to formalize our partnership." "Partnership?" Margaret spat the word like poison. She pushed through the crowd, her elegant dress swishing. "You mean you manipulated your way into his bed and his bank account? Everyone knows what you are, what kind of woman travels across the country to trap a man." "That's enough." Ethan's voice cracked like a whip. "You will not speak to my wife that way." "Your wife?" Margaret's laugh was ugly. "For how long, Ethan? Until she's bled you dry? Until she's replaced every memory of Sarah? Or maybe that's already happened. Maybe you couldn't wait to forget the woman who actually loved you." The cruelty of it stole Clara's breath. But before she could respond, before Ethan could move, Noah stepped forward. "Miss Thornberry, you're being mean." His young voice rang clear and strong. Clara's good and kind, and she makes Papa smile sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking. She teaches me reading and makes the house feel like a home again, and she never tries to replace Mama because nobody could. But Mama's gone and we're still here, and we deserve to be happy too." Silence crashed down. Margaret stared at the boy, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. Noah didn't back down, his small shoulders squared, protecting the woman who'd become his champion. "Noah's right," Ethan said into the quiet. "My son wrote to Clara because he saw what I couldn't see, that we needed help, that grief was destroying us. She came here in good faith and has shown nothing but integrity and hard work. Yesterday, I made her my wife because I respect her. I value her, and I'll be damned if I let this town's gossip drive away someone who's brought light back into our lives." "How convenient," Samuel Thornbury finally spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "You marry her the day after the land office inspector visits. Some might call that suspicious timing." "Some might call it good sense," Ethan shot back. "Finch came here with manufactured complaints designed to intimidate me into making choices that served someone else's interests. I chose differently. I chose my family." "Family," Margaret's voice broke. "You don't know the meaning of the word. Sarah was your family. Sarah loved you, stood by you, built this ranch with you, and you've replaced her with this nobody from nowhere who answered a child's desperate letter. Sarah's gone." Ethan's voice rang out with anguish he'd kept bottled for a year. "She's been gone for 12 months and nothing I do will bring her back. I loved her. I'll always love her. But she's not here, and I am, and Noah is, and we have to keep living. Clara understands that. She's not trying to replace Sarah or erase her memory. She's just trying to help us survive." Tears streaked down Margaret's face. "You were supposed to be mine. Our fathers arranged it. We were supposed to unite the properties, build something together." "I never agreed to that arrangement," Ethan said more gently. "Your father wanted it. Maybe you wanted it, but I never did. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I won't lie about it to spare your feelings." Reverend Walsh stepped forward, clearly trying to restore some semblance of order. "Perhaps we should all take a breath. This is a time for celebration, not confrontation. The Coles have announced their marriage. As a community, we should offer our congratulations and support." But the crowd remained frozen, torn between scandal and propriety. Clara felt the weight of their judgment, their speculation, their barely concealed disgust. She'd known it would be difficult, but the reality was worse than imagination. These people hated her, resented her, saw her as an interloper, a usurper, a woman who'd stolen something that didn't belong to her. "I think we should leave," she murmured to Ethan. "No." His voice was firm. "We came here to be seen, to establish our legitimacy. We're not running away." He took Clara's hand, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone. The touch was warm, solid, anchoring. "My wife and I are going to get some food and enjoy this social. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to leave." It was a direct challenge. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Mrs. Henderson, a widow who ran the boarding house, stepped forward. "Congratulations, Ethan, Clara," she said warmly. "Marriage is always worth celebrating, regardless of how it comes about. I wish you both happiness." Her support broke the ice. A few others came forward, offering congratulations that ranged from genuine to grudging. Not everyone. Margaret stormed off with her father in tow. Several families made excuses and left entirely. But enough people stayed, enough offered polite words and careful smiles, that the gathering didn't completely dissolve. Clara found herself in stilted conversations about recipes and weather, her hand still clasped in Ethan's, both of them performing normalcy while tension hummed beneath every word. Noah stuck close, his earlier bravery giving way to uncertainty as he realized what they'd walked into. The afternoon crawled past with agonizing slowness. Finally, mercifully, Ethan declared it was time to head home. They said their goodbyes, collected their wagon, and left under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. No one spoke during the ride home. Noah fell asleep against Clara's side, exhausted by the emotional ordeal. Clara stared at the horizon and tried not to think about Margaret's tears, Samuel Thornbury's fury, the way half the town had looked at her like she was something unclean. "You did well," Ethan said quietly, as the ranch came into view. "I felt like I was on trial." "You were." We both were. He glanced at her, his expression softer than she'd seen it. But we survived. That counts for something. They put Noah to bed together, the boy barely waking as they tucked him in. In the hallway outside his room, Clara and Ethan stood in awkward proximity, neither quite sure how to navigate this new reality. "I'll sleep in the house tonight," Ethan said, "in Sarah's old sewing room. It's small, but it'll do. We need to maintain appearances even when no one's watching, in case anyone decides to spy." "That seems wise." Clara twisted her wedding ring. "Ethan, about what Margaret said, she's hurt and lashing out. Don't let it burrow under your skin." "But she was right about some things. We barely know each other. This marriage is built on necessity, not affection. What if we're making a terrible mistake?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "When Sarah was dying, in those final hours when the fever had her, and we both knew she wasn't coming back, she grabbed my hand. She said, 'Don't let the grief kill you. Don't let it kill Noah. Find a way to keep living, even if it hurts.' I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought keeping living meant just going through the motions, working until I was too tired to feel." He met Clara's eyes, and she saw rawness there, vulnerability he rarely showed. "But you came here, and I started to understand. Living isn't just surviving. It's making choices that move you forward, even when those choices are hard, even when they're not the romantic ideal everyone expects." He took a breath. "This marriage might be unconventional. It might be built on practicality rather than passion, but it's a choice we both made with clear eyes. That has to count for something." "I hope you're right," Clara whispered. "So do I." He retreated to the sewing room, and Clara returned to her own chamber. She lay awake long into the night, listening to the house settle around her, thinking about Margaret's accusations and Ethan's defense and the strange, fragile thing they were trying to build. The next week passed in careful routine. They maintained their arrangement, separate rooms and cordial distance, but with slightly more ease. Ethan thanked her for meals. Clara asked about his work. Noah bridged the gaps between them with his constant chatter and demands for attention. The town remained divided. Some families began accepting the marriage, inviting the Coles to gatherings, treating Clara with cautious respect. Others, led by the Thornberrys, made their disapproval clear through cold shoulders and pointed snubs. Clara learned to navigate the social minefield with practiced grace. She kept her head high, her manner pleasant but firm. She refused to cower or apologize for her existence. Then, 2 weeks after the wedding, Lawrence Finch returned. Clara was in the garden when she saw him riding up, accompanied by 2 other official-looking men. Her stomach dropped. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to find Ethan, who was working in the barn. "Finch is here," she said without preamble. "With reinforcements." Ethan's face went hard. "Stay behind me. Let me handle this." They met the men in the yard. Finch dismounted with barely concealed satisfaction, unrolling a document with official seals. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole," he said with false politeness. "I'm here to deliver the results of the moral fitness assessment." "I thought the marriage resolved your concerns," Ethan said coldly. "It would have, if the marriage were genuine." Finch's smile was cruel. "Unfortunately, our investigation has revealed evidence of fraud. Multiple witnesses report that you and your alleged wife maintain separate sleeping quarters, that you show no genuine affection, that this marriage is clearly a legal convenience rather than a legitimate union." Clara's blood went cold. Someone had been watching them, spying, reporting back every detail of their private lives. "Our sleeping arrangements are our business," she said, voice shaking with fury. "Not when they prove fraud, Mrs. Cole. The law is clear. Marriages entered into solely to circumvent legal requirements can be annulled, and once annulled, the original moral violations stand." Finch's eyes gleamed. "You have 30 days to vacate this property before formal revocation proceedings begin." "You can't do this," Ethan said, his voice dangerous. "We're legally married. Judge Morton himself performed the ceremony." "A ceremony, yes, but not a marriage. Not in any meaningful sense." Finch glanced between them. "Unless you can prove otherwise, demonstrate that this is a genuine union, not a business arrangement. Show us evidence of actual marital relations, shared domestic life, the kind of intimacy that defines legitimate marriage." The implication was clear and disgusting. Prove you're sleeping together or lose everything. This is extortion, Clara said. You're demanding we prove intimate details of our private life to satisfy your perverted curiosity. I'm demanding you prove the marriage is real. Finch rolled up his document. 30 days, Mr. Cole. Unless circumstances change dramatically, this land will be forfeit. Good day. He rode away with his companions, leaving Clara and Ethan standing in stunned silence. The trap had been sprung perfectly. They'd married to save the land, but the marriage itself was now the weapon being used against them. Who told them? Clara asked numbly. Who's been watching us? Does it matter? Ethan's voice was hollow. They're right. We're not really married, not in the way they mean. We're business partners with legal documentation. So what do we do? Ethan turned to face her, his expression desperate and determined in equal measure. We make it real. We stop sleeping in separate rooms. We stop maintaining careful distance. We give them exactly what they're demanding, proof of a genuine marriage. Clara's heart hammered. You mean? I mean we share a room. A bed. We act like actual husband and wife, not colleagues who happen to be legally bound. He ran a hand through his hair. I know that's not what we agreed to. I know it changes everything. But I can't lose this land, Clara. It's all I have left of Sarah's dream. All I have to give Noah. You're asking me to give up the boundaries we established, the protection those boundaries provided. I'm asking you to help me save everything we've built. His eyes pleaded with her. I know it's not fair. I know I have no right. But I'm asking anyway. Clara stared at him, her mind racing. She'd agreed to a marriage of convenience, not a real marriage. She'd agreed to partnership, not intimacy. But now he was asking her to cross lines she'd thought safely drawn. The alternative was losing everything: the ranch, Noah's stability, her own place in this fragile new life. All right, she heard herself say. We'll make it real, whatever that takes. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to examine. Clara felt her pulse hammering in her throat as the weight of her agreement settled over her like a cloak she couldn't shrug off. Making the marriage real meant dismantling every careful boundary they'd constructed, every protection she'd wrapped around her heart. Ethan exhaled slowly, relief and apprehension warring across his features. We'll need to be convincing. If whoever's spying reports back that nothing's changed, Finch will use it against us. So we share a room starting tonight, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Move my things into the master bedroom. Make it visible to anyone who might be watching. And during the day, we act like newlyweds, or at least like a married couple who actually likes each other. Ethan's mouth twisted. I know that's asking a lot, given how we started. We've both asked a lot of each other, Clara said quietly. This is just one more impossible thing on a long list. They spent the rest of the afternoon in tense preparation. Clara packed her few belongings from Sarah's old room while Ethan cleared space in the master bedroom's wardrobe and dresser. The room still bore traces of his first wife. A hairbrush on the vanity, a shawl draped over a chair, the faint scent of lavender that had been her favorite. Clara felt like an intruder, stepping into a shrine she had no right to disturb. I should have done this a year ago, Ethan said, appearing in the doorway with her valise. He set it down and looked around the room with haunted eyes. Put her things away. Let the space breathe. But I couldn't. Every time I tried, it felt like erasing her. You don't have to erase her, Clara said carefully, but maybe it's time to make room for the present alongside the past. Together, they gathered Sarah's personal items, the brush, the shawl, a small jewelry box, a framed daguerreotype. Ethan wrapped them carefully in cloth and placed them in a trunk. His hands shook as he closed the lid. She was a good woman, he said roughly. She deserved better than dying young, deserved to see Noah grow up. I'm sure she did. Clara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. And I'm sure she'd want you to keep living, to be happy, even if that happiness looks different than what you planned. Ethan covered her hand with his own, the touch brief but genuine. Thank you. For understanding, for not resenting her memory. How could I resent someone I never knew? Someone who clearly loved you and Noah so much. Clara squeezed his shoulder before pulling away. Now, let's make this room ours, both of us, together. They worked in companionable silence, rearranging furniture, hanging Clara's few dresses beside Ethan's shirts, creating a space that belonged to neither the past nor an imagined future, but to the strange, fragile present they were building together. When Noah came in for dinner, he noticed the changes immediately. His eyes went wide as he saw Clara's belongings in the master bedroom. "Are you and Papa sharing a room now?" he asked, voice high with hope. "We are," Clara confirmed. "Married people typically do, sweetheart." "Does this mean you're really married? Not just pretend married?" The question was more perceptive than a 7-year-old should have been capable of. Clara exchanged a glance with Ethan, who crouched down to Noah's level. "We were always really married," Ethan said carefully, "but we're still getting to know each other, still figuring out how to be a family. That takes time. You understand?" Noah nodded slowly. "Like how you said mama and you started as friends and became love later?" "Exactly like that." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "Clara and I are building something together. It might not look like what other people expect, but it's real, and it's ours." The boy threw his arms around both of them, pulling them into an awkward three-way embrace. "I'm glad. I was worried you'd send her away like you tried to do at the train station." "Never," Ethan said, meeting Clara's eyes over Noah's head. "She's family now. Family stays." That night, after Noah was asleep, Clara and Ethan faced the reality of sharing a bed for the first time. The room felt impossibly small, despite its generous size. Clara changed into her nightgown in the adjoining washroom, taking far longer than necessary, trying to calm her racing heart. When she emerged, Ethan was already in bed, carefully positioned on the far edge, his back to her side. He'd left the lamp burning low. "I won't touch you," he said without turning around. "I know this is uncomfortable enough without—" He stopped, searching for words. "We'll maintain what privacy we can." Clara slipped beneath the covers on her side, maintaining as much distance as the mattress allowed. "Thank you." They lay in rigid silence, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Clara stared at the ceiling, counting her breaths, trying to ignore the warmth radiating from Ethan's body, the sound of his breathing, the impossible intimacy of sharing a bed with a man who was legally her husband but emotionally still a stranger. "Clara?" His voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes? I'm sorry. For all of it. For how we started. For the position you're in now, for asking more than I have any right to ask." "We're both asking impossible things of each other," Clara whispered. "That makes us even." She heard him shift slightly. "When I stood at that train platform and rejected you, I thought I was protecting myself, protecting Noah, protecting Sarah's memory. But all I was really doing was being afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of living. Of letting anyone else in. Of admitting that grief wasn't enough to sustain me forever." He was quiet for a moment. "You terrified me, still do sometimes." Clara's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you make me feel things I thought died with Sarah. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Hope. The sense that maybe life could be more than just endurance." He finally turned to face her in the dimness. "That's terrifying when you've convinced yourself that endurance is all you deserve." Clara turned too, meeting his eyes. "I understand. After my parents died, I convinced myself that being alone was safer, that needing nothing from anyone meant I couldn't be disappointed. But lonely safety is its own kind of death. So we're both half-dead people trying to figure out how to live again," Ethan said with a ghost of a smile. "I suppose we are." "Then maybe we can learn together, one impossible day at a time." "I'd like that," Clara whispered. They fell asleep facing each other across the expanse of white sheets, not touching, but not quite separate either, building bridges in the darkness. The next weeks brought their own strange rhythm. During the day, Clara and Ethan made deliberate efforts to appear like a genuine married couple. They worked side by side in the garden, sat together on the porch in the evenings, touched each other casually, naturally, hands brushing as they passed dishes at dinner, shoulders bumping as they read to Noah together. Some of it was performance, crafted for whoever might be watching. But some of it began to feel real. Clara found herself seeking Ethan's opinion on household decisions, not because she had to, but because she genuinely valued his input. Ethan started sharing stories about the ranch, about Sarah, about the early years of building something from nothing, The stories no longer felt like comparisons, but like gifts, pieces of himself he was choosing to share. Noah blossomed under the new dynamic. He laughed more, asked questions freely, threw himself into his lessons with renewed enthusiasm. The house itself seemed lighter, as if the walls had been holding their breath and could finally exhale. But the threat of losing everything still loomed. Lawrence Finch made periodic appearances, always watching, always taking notes, clearly waiting for them to slip up and reveal the cracks in their performance. 3 weeks after moving into the master bedroom, Clara and Ethan made their weekly trip to town for supplies. They walked into Hendrick's store hand in hand, a united front against the whispers that still followed them. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with several other women from the church social. "Mrs. Cole," Mrs. Patterson said with brittle politeness, "how domestic of you, shopping with your husband." "We prefer to make decisions together," Clara said smoothly. "Partnership is the foundation of a strong marriage." "How modern." The older woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Though some might say true partnership requires a longer courtship than a few weeks. Some might say true partnership is built through shared trials rather than easy courtship," Ethan countered, his hand tightening on Clara's. "My wife and I have faced more challenges in 2 months than most couples see in years. It's made us stronger." The declaration was bold, possessive, and utterly convincing. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at the fierce certainty in his voice. He wasn't just performing for the audience. There was truth underneath the words. They completed their shopping and were loading supplies into the wagon when Samuel Thornberry approached, Margaret trailing behind him. The older man's face was hard with barely controlled anger. "Cole, I want a word." "Then have it," Ethan said evenly, not releasing Clara's hand. "This farce has gone on long enough. Everyone knows your marriage is a sham designed to circumvent the land assessment. You've made a mockery of the institution, disrespected my daughter, and dragged this entire town into your deception. My marriage is none of your concern, Thornberry. It is when it affects my property interests." Samuel's voice rose. "That land should have been mine through Margaret's marriage to you. We had an understanding—" "You had hopes," Ethan interrupted coldly. "I never made promises to you or your daughter. You assumed, and you were wrong." Margaret stepped forward, her face pale. "Ethan, please. It doesn't have to be like this. This woman has bewitched you somehow, made you forget what you owe to Sarah's memory, to our family's arrangement. I owe Sarah peace," Ethan said, his voice gentling slightly. "And respect. That means moving forward with my life instead of being trapped in grief. Clara understands that. She's helped me understand it too." "She's a nobody." Margaret's composure cracked. "A desperate woman with no family, no connections, nothing to offer but her willingness to degrade herself by answering a child's letter." "She's my wife," Ethan's voice rang clear, "and she's shown more courage, more grace, and more genuine kindness than anyone else in this town, including you." The crowd that had gathered gasped. Margaret's face went white, then crimson. Samuel Thornberry's hands clenched into fists. "You'll regret this, Cole. When Finch's assessment is complete, when your fraudulent marriage is exposed, you'll lose everything, and don't come crawling back expecting mercy." "I won't need mercy," Ethan said. "I have something better. I have family." He helped Clara into the wagon, climbed up beside her, and drove away without looking back. Clara sat rigid, her heart pounding, torn between pride at his defense and fear of the consequences. "That may have made things worse," she said quietly. "Maybe. But I'm tired of letting bullies dictate my life." Ethan glanced at her. "You are my wife. That means I protect you, defend you, stand with you. I should have been doing that from the beginning instead of hiding and hoping the problem would go away." "Ethan," Claire's voice caught, "thank you for what you said back there, for defending me. I meant every word." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You've become important to me, Clara. More important than I expected. This started as a practical arrangement, but it's become something else, something real." Clara's eyes burned with tears. "For me too. I know we agreed this would be a partnership, nothing more, but I can't help—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Can't help what?" Ethan asked gently. "Can't help hoping it might become more. Eventually. If you're willing, The admission left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop in a quiet stretch of road. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. When Sarah died, I thought my capacity for love died with her. I thought there was only room for grief and responsibility. But you've shown me I was wrong. There's room for more. It's not the same as what I had with Sarah, and it shouldn't be. But it's real, it's growing, and it matters. What are you saying? Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying I want this marriage to be more than legal convenience, more than performance for Finch and the gossips. He cupped her face gently. I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Clara Cole. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Clara's tears spilled over. I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks, but I was too afraid to admit it. Ethan leaned forward and kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. It was their first real kiss, the one they'd skipped at their wedding, and it tasted like hope and promise and the beginning of something neither had thought possible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. We're going to get through this, he said. Finch, the Thornberrys, all of it. We'll fight together, and we'll win. Together, Clara agreed, but the fight came sooner than expected. The next day, Lawrence Finch arrived with a sheriff's deputy and legal papers. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, I'm here to deliver final notice. The land office assessment has concluded that your marriage fails to meet the standards of legitimacy required for homestead claims. You have 7 days to vacate before forced removal. Clara felt the bottom drop out of her world. 7 days. After everything they'd done, all the boundaries they'd crossed, the love they'd discovered, it wasn't enough. You can't do this, she said, her voice shaking. We're legally married. We share a home, a life, a family. What more do you want? Evidence that this marriage existed before the land assessment threat. Evidence that it's not merely a legal strategy. Finch's smile was cruel. You married the day after I delivered the initial warning. That timing speaks for itself. Timing proves nothing, Ethan argued. We'd been living together for weeks before that, building a relationship. The marriage was a natural progression. According to whom? Your son, who orchestrated the entire deception? Your neighbor witnesses who report you maintained separate rooms until my second visit? Finch shook his head. The evidence is clear. This is fraud, and fraud has consequences. Then we'll appeal, Clara said desperately. Take this to a higher court. Fight the decision. By all means try, but you'll be fighting from a different location. This land is forfeit. Finch handed the papers to Ethan. 7 days, Mr. Cole. I suggest you start packing. He left with the deputy, leaving devastation in his wake. Ethan stared at the papers, his face ashen. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together as everything fell apart. We can't just give up, she said. There has to be something we can do. Like what? We've played every card we have, made the marriage real, shown affection publicly, shared our lives completely. But none of it matters because the timing looks suspicious. Ethan's voice was hollow. They've beaten us. No. Clara grabbed his arm. We haven't fought in the way that matters. We've been defending ourselves, trying to prove our legitimacy to people who've already decided we're guilty. But what if we go on offense? What if we expose why this is really happening? What do you mean? Clara's mind raced, pieces clicking together. Finch keeps saying anonymous complaints. But they're not anonymous, are they? The Thornberrys have been behind this from the beginning. They want your land to expand their holdings. Margaret wants revenge for rejection. They've been using Finch and the land office as weapons. Even if that's true, we can't prove it. Maybe we can. Clara paced, thinking furiously. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house hears everything. The land office records are public. If we can connect Finch to the Thornberrys, show financial incentive or personal relationship, we can prove corruption. Prove this whole assessment is a vendetta, not legitimate concern. Ethan's eyes widened. It's a long shot. It's the only shot we have. Clara grabbed his hands. We have 7 days. Let's use them to fight instead of surrender. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, the hopelessness giving way to determined fire. All right, let's go to war. They spent the next 3 days gathering evidence with single-minded intensity. Mrs. Henderson, sympathetic to their cause, revealed that Finch had been seen dining privately with Samuel Thornberry multiple times. The land office clerk, persuaded by a generous donation to his retirement fund, produced records showing Finch had financial ties to Thornberry's cattle company. Clara interviewed neighbors, collecting testimonies about the Thornberrys' attempts to intimidate other small ranchers into selling their land. Ethan tracked down the previous inspector, who'd been mysteriously replaced by Finch just before the assessment began. On the 5th day, they took their evidence to Judge Morton. He listened carefully, his expression growing darker as they laid out the pattern of corruption and manipulation. "This is serious," he said finally. "If you're right, Finch has violated his oath of office. The Thornberrys have committed fraud. But you understand that making these accusations without ironclad proof could destroy you?" "We have proof," Clara said, spreading documents across his desk. "Financial connections, witness testimony, a pattern of harassment, and we have our marriage certificate signed by you, declaring us legally wed. That should be enough to satisfy any legitimate moral assessment." Judge Morton studied the evidence for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "I'll call an emergency hearing. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I'll summon Finch, the Thornberrys, and the Territorial Land Office supervisor. You'll present your case, they'll present theirs, and I'll make a ruling." "Thank you," Ethan said roughly. "Don't thank me yet. This could go either way, but you deserve your day in court." They went home and told Noah everything. The boy listened with wide eyes, then threw his arms around both of them. "You're going to win," he said with absolute certainty. "You have to, because we're a family and families don't lose." That night, Clara and Ethan lay awake in their shared bed, hands clasped between them. "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "So am I." Ethan brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "But I'm also grateful. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, purpose, love." "I love you," Clara whispered. "However this started, whatever brought us together, I love you. Truly. I love you too." Ethan pulled her close, holding her against his chest. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, regardless of where we live or what we lose." The courtroom was packed the next morning. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the final showdown. Clara sat beside Ethan at the plaintiff's table, Noah between them, all three holding hands. Across the room, the Thornberrys sat rigid with fury. Lawrence Finch looked nervous, sweat beading his forehead. Judge Morton called the court to order. "We're here to address the land office assessment of the Cole homestead and allegations of corruption in that process. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, present your evidence." For the next hour, they laid out their case methodically. The financial connections between Finch and the Thornberrys, the testimonies from intimidated neighbors, the suspicious timing of Finch's appointment, the previous inspector's statement that the Cole homestead had passed all legitimate assessments. Finally, Clara stood and addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, my husband and I are here because we fell in love in the most unexpected way possible, not through courtship or grand romance, but through shared work, mutual respect, and the courage to build something new from broken pieces. Our marriage may have unusual origins, but it's as real as any union celebrated in this town. We share a home, a life, a son we're raising together. We love each other. That's not fraud. That's family." The courtroom was silent. Margaret Thornberry had tears streaming down her face. Several spectators wiped their eyes. Judge Morton turned to Finch. "Do you have a response to these allegations?" Finch stood, his hands shaking. "Your Honor, I was following protocol. The complaints I received seemed legitimate." "Complaints from whom specifically?" the judge interrupted. Finch glanced at Samuel Thornberry, who shook his head minutely. The land inspector's resolve crumbled. "From Samuel Thornberry," he admitted. "He approached me with concerns about moral violations and suggested the Cole homestead needed thorough assessment." "And your financial relationship with Mr. Thornberry's cattle company?" "I invested in it, yes, but that doesn't mean—" "It means you had a conflict of interest that you failed to disclose." Judge Morton's voice was hard as iron. "It means this entire assessment was compromised from the start. He turned to Samuel Thornberry. Do you have anything to say? The older man stood slowly. That land should have been part of my holdings through my daughter's marriage to Cole. He led her on, made her believe they had an understanding, then betrayed her with this outsider. I was protecting my family's interests. By abusing your connections to manipulate government officials? Judge Morton's disgust was evident. By attempting to steal a man's rightful property through legal intimidation? That's not protecting interests, Mr. Thornberry. That's corruption. He banged his gavel. I hereby declare the Land Office assessment of the Cole homestead null and void due to investigator malfeasance and conflict of interest. The homestead claim stands. Furthermore, I'm recommending Lawrence Finch be removed from his position and investigated for ethics violations. And Mr. Thornberry, you'll be hearing from the Territorial Attorney General about your role in this conspiracy. The courtroom erupted. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as Ethan pulled her into his arms. Noah was crying and laughing at the same time, hugging them both fiercely. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against everyone who'd said their marriage was a sham, they'd won. Outside the courthouse, neighbors who'd been skeptical now came forward with congratulations and apologies. Mrs. Henderson hugged Clara tightly. Even some of the Thornberry's allies quietly expressed their relief that justice had been served. Margaret Thornberry approached as they were heading to their wagon. Her father had already stalked off in humiliated fury. I'm sorry, she said quietly, not meeting their eyes, for everything. I was hurt and angry, and I let those feelings make me cruel. You didn't deserve any of it. Thank you for saying that, Clara said gently. I hope you find happiness, Margaret. Real happiness, not just what you think you should want. The other woman nodded, tears tracking down her face, then walked away. Clara watched her go, feeling more pity than anger. Ready to go home? Ethan asked, his arm around her waist. Home, Clara repeated, testing the word. It fit perfectly. Yes, let's go home. The weeks that followed brought healing and growth. With the threat lifted, Clara and Ethan's relationship deepened into genuine partnership and love. The boundaries they'd crossed out of necessity became bridges to intimacy they chose freely. They laughed together, worked together, occasionally argued, and always reconciled. Noah thrived, his reading improving dramatically, his confidence growing. He still talked about his mother sometimes, but without the desperate grief that had consumed him. Sarah became a cherished memory rather than a haunting presence. The ranch prospered. With Clara managing the household efficiently, Ethan had more time and energy for improving operations. They hired a ranch hand, expanded their cattle herd, and even started planning additions to the house. 6 months after the trial, on a crisp autumn evening, Clara stood in the garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Ethan approaching, a small box in his hands. "What's this?" she asked. "Your wedding ring is still too big," he said. And I realized I never properly proposed, never asked, just assumed and demanded. He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold band sized correctly. "Claire Cole, will you marry me? Not because we have to, not to save the ranch or satisfy bureaucrats, but because I love you and I choose you and I want to spend the rest of my life building our future together?" Clara laughed through tears. "We're already married, you impossible man. I know, but I want to do it right this time, with intention, with love." He slipped the new ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "So what do you say?" "Yes," Clara whispered, pulling him into a kiss. "Yes to all of it, forever." They stood together in the garden as the sun set over the mountains, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other, building a family from courage and choice and unexpected grace. Noah came running from the house, shouting that dinner was ready, and they walked back together, hands clasped, three people who'd been strangers and were now irrevocably, permanently, beautifully family. The letter that had started it all, written in a child's desperate hand, now sat framed in the parlor, not as a reminder of deception, but as a testament to hope. Sometimes the family you choose, the love you build from necessity and courage, becomes stronger than anything you could have planned. And sometimes the best stories begin with rejection, impossibility, and a small voice saying, "My son chose you."